We need to challenge our thoughts. We need to be heard. We need to share. So connectivity helps you to offload so much of this weight and to feel light again. Welcome back to Love, Life, and Legacy, the podcast dedicated to helping you navigate these hypersexualized times of ours. So in today's episode, everybody, I'm going to unpack your two sides, right? We all have these two sides. We have this side of us that is when we're connected, we feel a certain way. And when we're isolated, that's our other side, we feel another certain way. And it is not a nice certain way at all. In fact, it's us at our worst. So here's the deal. If you would like to be happy, you need to figure out what it's like to be connected and what it's like to be isolated. And when you can see these two sides of yourself, you can start optimizing your life for connection. This whole episode is to help you see these two sides of yourself, but also really to sell you on the idea of prioritizing connection. And remember, there's 4 types of connection that I've identified: connection to self, connection to others, connection to God, and connection to a sense of purpose. When you have these 4 realms of connection, you start to have a life that makes sense, that flows, that works. Not perfect, but it flows in the right direction towards the person that you want to be. And so this is really looking at unpacking the two sides, the unconnected or the isolated, the disconnected or isolated self, or the super connected self. And it's a great episode. I would highly recommend it. 5 out of 5 tacos. You should listen to this episode. Welcome back, everybody. How are you doing? Trying a few cameras here. Don't know if you can see this magic. If you're watching this, I just wanted to create a little bit more dynamics for your visual stimulation. But hey, welcome. It's fall season here in the world where I'm recording, when I'm recording. Who knows when you're going to listen to this? Yeah, hey, if you're listening to this and it's not 2025, if it's like 2027 or 2028, that's a crazy notion. Let me know how this is landing, how these episodes land in the future. The future, I just heard a prediction this morning from some AI guru that there's going to be 99% joblessness in the year 2027 to 2030, something like that. All of these super smart tech people are just predicting the demise of humanity. It's so funny. Now these people believe in us. They worship machines and they feel like humans are just going to kill ourselves. These people are traditionally always wrong, you know? But let's see if I'm still reachable, if I'm not, living under a rock or living in Mars or something like that. Reach out to me. Let me know how's it going. So today, guys and gals, I really wanted to talk about something that I've talked about before, but I'm going to reframe it. Connection, right? Connection is a fundamental ingredient towards living a life worth living. Nobody, if they could choose from their deepest self, would ever be connected for any length of time, because that's where everything starts falling apart. It's where we're at our worst, actually. Obviously, that doesn't mean we don't need to spend time by ourselves. We do. I get it. But that's not us. That's not the point of life, is to be by ourselves. You go crazy when you spend too much time by yourself. So, but this is like a life skill that people are losing. It's becoming antiquated. Like, it's not as common to know the skills and to master the skills of being connected. Before, it was almost impossible to not be connected. You'd have to be, I don't know, a leper back in the day, or you'd have to be shunned by your society. But it was never a choice where you just be like, yeah, I guess I'll just live on my own, because you would die. Back in the day, you would die. You needed your community in order to survive for whatever reasons, because people were farmers and you need food. You played a role in a society and you contribute to the society in some way in order to benefit from the society. Now you can exist in society and never leave your house. People do it all the time and they don't contribute, and it really pays its toll. And so I just wanted to unpack this and to try to help you to understand the difference between our two selves, which we have. We have 2 very clear selves. We have our connected self and we have our isolated self. These 2 selves are 2 parts of the same person. It's just like those 2 wolves, and you're either feeding one or the other. And I want to really make a case for you to be able to feed with priority every single day your connected self, okay? Because when you do this, your life will turn into like a garden that's just blooming that's just makes sense, that you feel welcomed in. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be perfect or easy for that matter, but you'll get through the difficulties much quicker and much more easily with less drama, with less collateral damage if you do it in a way that's connected. And if not, it's just so much harder to live life on this planet. Everything is harder when you're isolated, when you're alone, okay? So there's two sides of ourselves, very distinct, that we feed either by connecting or by isolating ourselves. Now remember, connection doesn't just mean some general thing, some general state of being. It's the result. Feeling connected is the result of actions, right? So that's connected to yourself, means you spending time with yourself through reflection, meditation, thinking by yourself, learning about yourself by learning your limitations and overcoming them, taking time to see your patterns and to work with some of your patterns, break down some of your patterns, and then create new patterns, healthy patterns. If you have bad habits, learning how to replace those with better habits, right? But there's connection to self, connection to God, connection to your environment, people and places, right? This is the total. And I also added connection to a sense of mission in the original kind of podcast where I did a deep dive in connection. So this is us. This connection is like super, super important. Yes, established. Perfect. Now let's look at you, because if I just say this, people are like, yeah, Andrew, I get it. Just shut up about it already. But we know this stuff intellectually. If you've been listening to our podcast for any length of time, we still isolate ourselves from time to time. And I want you to be aware of this and to kind of think about how this manifests in your life. So I have 5 different themes that I want to unpack and juxtapose against each other, right? Meaning, so the first one is your mental health and well-being. So in terms of your mental health and like what is going on in this little this thinker, the thing that occupies so much of your energy is your brain. It zaps so much of our energy thinking, right? And when we're isolated, we just waste so much of our energy worrying about stuff that doesn't matter, feeling like we don't matter, or feeling or thinking like these thoughts run around our head that produce emotions. So you think something long enough, like I don't like myself, I'm fat, I'm stupid, whatever it is. You repeat these things enough times to where they start to produce an emotion, a negative emotion associated to negative thoughts. And then this just becomes your reality. Is like, let's say about intelligence, right? Like, I'm stupid. So you just repeat this, I'm stupid, I can't figure that out. Then that's where your energy actually starts going, is you start producing this feeling of I'm not smart. And then the result is that when difficult things come to you, like questions, or like if you're in school, you go out to a test and you're like, I'm not smart, you actually end up spending time kind of trying to defend this thesis that like I am stupid. And so you find ways to prove that you are stupid. You know how I know this? Yeah, that's right. I believed I was really, really stupid for quite some time because I was a bad student. And it turns out that if you do bad in school, sometimes some teachers will say that they'll make assumptions that you're just not smart. And then it just becomes part of the lore that you believe about yourself. And if you're just left to your own thoughts and you're isolated, then these thoughts become deeply held beliefs. Like, I guess it's true. I guess it's true. I guess I'm a dummy. And then it's just this reality that sits in you really heavy, right? But if you have people in your life to help you work through these thoughts, and again, Benji, myself, all the High Noon staff, we all mentor people, and we know the mental chatter that goes on inside of our mentees. This is for the Ascend program, but we know it's true of anybody in the core program who's preparing for marriage. Think about all the lies that you believe about yourself. Think about that. Like, I'm not good enough for marriage, or I'm too fat, or I'm too ugly, or I'm not interesting enough, I'm not smart enough. Very overwhelming one is like, I don't have enough money. I need like a certain amount of money in order to be ready for marriage. It's very strange, right? But there are all these lies that if go unchallenged, they become truths. Lies become truths without being challenged. Where does this challenge come from? Well, when you're doing really well, it comes from you. But all of us believe some lies because we don't tell people what's going on in our head. So our mental health starts to get really, really hairy, and we start to suffer because of having wrong thoughts that we repeat enough to believe them. And again, so if you're connected, You can offload anxiety so much more by sharing it with somebody who listens and somebody who also challenges you every once in a while. Because so often we'll talk to, let's say, a young person who's struggling, and they'll say, I can't do this thing that I want to do because of this. And when I hear it, it makes no sense. I'm like, how do they think this? Oh, because they're believing lies. I can't go to the blessing because I'm not perfect. Oh, that's interesting. Because of all those perfect people who went to the blessing. Yeah, like you'll find out when you get blessed, actually, we're all perfect over here. We're in the VIP room of perfection, actually. There's no perfect people. So in terms of mental health, your isolated self, you will end up creating so much more complications in the way that you're thinking, because you're just always trying to protect yourself. It's not because you're bad. It's because this is how we survive when we don't have enough resources. We just create shortcuts in our thinking. We have some very weird thoughts. And if they don't go unchallenged, then they just become true. And then that becomes our reality. We need to challenge our thoughts. We need to be heard. We need to share. So connectivity helps you to offload so much of this weight and to feel light again. The second theme is identity and self-esteem, right? So a lot of times when we're isolated, we question our worth and we say things like, I'm not worthy of the blessing, or I'm a bad spouse, or I know Benji and I have unpacked this on the podcast. He's many times gone, and myself as well, had this thought repeated, I'm a bad father. I'm a bad father. I'm no good at being a husband. I'm bad at this. I don't know what I'm doing, right? And there's a lot of evidence that you can find when you're by yourself to look for this and you focus on that. That becomes true. When in fact, it could be like the least true thing in the world. But let's say out of every 1,000 instances of you being a person, you make one mistake. Humans have the tendency to focus on that one mistake and say, that's who I am. I am this one mistake. Not the 999 times that they did something really well, right? I remember this because I publicly speak all the time. And if I'm speaking to a big crowd, small crowd, it doesn't matter. But let's say every single person in that auditorium is having an amazing experience, and there's one person who's falling asleep, or they're checking their phone, or they're giving me that look, that stink eye look. All I can remember is that person. I remember that, I've been a pastor a couple times. I remember that in both communities that I was a pastor, there was a different guy in each community. I guess every community comes preloaded with this one archetype, which is the older guy who completely falls asleep when I speak to a given crowd. And I remember their faces really well because I remember what it looks like when they are starting to be overcome by the desire to drift into unconsciousness. Is pretty, and that's all I remember every Sunday. I just feel like, God, like wrong focus. Okay. So when we're isolated, we start to assume that we have less power than we do, that we have, okay, let me stop there for a second and unpack. A lot of times we overestimate how great we are when we're feeling like we have a good cup of coffee or something. We're feeling high on life. We're like, I could do anything, but we don't know how to get, like, I'll be a billionaire. I'll be a rock star. I'll be whatever, right? We have these kind of, they're not delusions, but they're aspirations that aren't connected to kind of like a process on how to get there. So we have these swells, these upswells of I can do anything, but it's usually then juxtaposed by this really strong feeling of actually, no, I suck, right? And so we have this kind of weird bipolar relationship with our belief in ourself. And for the most part, we don't believe very highly in ourselves and our capacity, unless you're well trained, right? So when you're connected, it helps you to reflect on your dreams and aspirations are valid, but where are you in respect to them? Okay. Like, let's say you want to be at the top of your field. If you have some vocation, like best engineer in your firm or whatever, you want to climb some ladder. It's nice to know where you are in the ladder, right? And that it's going to take some work and persistence and discipline to get to where you want to go. And without talking it out, you either feel like you're way further than you are from success or way closer than you are. But it's hard to figure out exactly where you are without bouncing these ideas off of people. And like I say, I would say, just off the top of my head, maybe 1 out of every 50 instances, we feel like we're way further away than we are from success, however we measure success. It's just like a lack of self-confidence. And then 1 out of every 50 instances, we feel like we're way better than we are at something. I did this a few times in my life growing up where I thought I was way more prepared for reality than I was. And like one time I got onto the big stage in this huge comedy company in Vancouver, Canada. I kind of talked my way there. I had a good reputation. Some people really liked my stuff. And I was like, yeah, I got this. I'm ready for the pros. And I went out there and I just fell on my face so hard. It was the worst show. And I remember the guy who was the director of that company. He was watching me. And at some point, he just got up and he looked at me and he waved. And it was this symbolic gesture of, you failed, buddy. And I was like, oh man, because I wasn't ready for that, man. I should have worked my way up. I skipped some steps. So again, when we're isolated, we have no idea how well we're doing in life. And we usually assume that we're doing worse than we are. We need to talk this stuff out. The third theme is problem solving and creativity. So when we're isolated, we're kind of like a record. I'm sure most of you don't even know what a record is, but before MP3s, there were CDs, and before CDs, there were tapes, and before tapes, there were records. Before records, we would just tickle a rhinoceros and we'd listen to it scream, as though I was a caveman, and as though cavemen actually did that. But records were like, that's how you listen to an album, and it would just go around and around in circles. And that's kind of our thinking, is unless we connect to other inspiration, we're usually stuck in our own heads. And this is very problematic because we're so limited unless we learn new perspective, new ideas from other people. Especially when you hang out with people who have diverse views and opinions, then it helps us to really become more empathetic, but also have stronger thoughts and opinions. And so I think a lot of people, especially people of faith, isolate themselves and only hang out with people of their own opinion. In fact, they don't have very strong belief. They have a lot of just the same thoughts over and over again that go unchallenged. And then when they do get challenged, they kind of lose their faith a lot of times. And this is only because they haven't really thought their faith through. We need to challenge our faith. We need to challenge, our concepts about sexuality for sure. Like the purity culture back in the 90s was not so healthy. And it was a lot of people, I've seen organizations are now against religion having anything to do with sex because of people's bad experience with purity culture back in the 90s. This is ridiculous. It's just like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Purity culture needed to evolve, not be thrown away. And that's what we're doing with Purity 2.0, right? And so it's the same with anything, is you cannot evolve without adding incremental new ideas through talking it out with other people. And also through prayer, connecting with God, connecting to yourself. That's how you have real ideas that stick and to help you. When you're connected, you unlock smarter, faster solutions. There's this phenomenon known as the collective wisdom or collective brain that you don't have access to by yourself. So as smart as, Nikola Tesla was in isolation, his fatal flaw was that he died actually in the New Yorker hotel. If you didn't know that, that's owned by our faith movement. He died in our New Yorker hotel by himself, totally broke. His ideas could have gotten humanity out of so many jams. He was of the belief that we could have electricity for free, Nikola Tesla. And he had the kind of resources mentally to make that a reality. But he was not good at selling his ideas and working with other people. So a lot of his ideas actually died with him. And he had some crazy, I don't know if you've ever been to the Griffith Park Observatory in LA and seen the Tesla coils, the lightning bolt room where you can produce lightning bolt is the craziest thing. There's pictures of him sitting in a giant room filled with lightning bolts. And anyway, I don't want to nerd out about that, but the greatest flaw is that he worked in isolation. He was a genius in a certain way, but he was not a genius in terms of connection. So humanity suffered because Nikola Tesla was not good at the sales part of his ideas and working with other people to kind of believe in him. So he got taken advantage of a lot. His ideas got crushed a lot. There's a lot of animosity between Thomas Edison, who actually, a lot of people credit him as being a genius, but actually he took a lot of other people's ideas. He was good at the sales aspect, right? So this is not a lesson about history. This is just saying that when we problem solve, we don't have access to certain ideas until we collaborate with other people. So if you think, hey, I want to go to the blessing, Or you think, hey, I want to overcome pornography. Oh, hey, I want to start a business. Don't do it by yourself. That's a ticket to insanity. You want to always be doing stuff with other people. The next one, fourth, is resilience and coping with challenges. So when we're isolated, every setback feels like the biggest, hardest challenge that we're never possibly going to overcome. It's like every little thing can seem so big until you gain context. How do you gain context? Prayer, self-reflection, connecting to yourself, and talking to other people. When you hear, especially what other people are dealing with, you're like, oh, my problems are not so big at all. No matter how bad it seems, somebody's always had it worse. And that contextually helps you to reduce your problems to a more manageable size. And this is the thing too of connecting with Heavenly Parent, with our God, is like when you think, oh, I have no money, I'm so poor, or I don't know what to do with my life, it can seem so big until you realize the scope of history. Like how long have humans been alive for, right? How long has the universe been alive for? It's not to make your problems seem insignificant. It's just make the problem seem less enormous and to contextualize them. Oh, this is my challenge that I can overcome. And when I overcome, I'm contributing to my time in history. And my time in history contributes to the next branch of history. And now I'm a part of this continuum of helping humanity gravitate towards God. How beautiful is that? Then your challenges have worthiness and meaning, but they also have context, that they're not the biggest thing in all of history, but they are part of history. So it gives you a reason to fight, right? So that's really hard to work through when you're just dealing with it by yourself. When you're connected, support turns your setbacks into setting you up to grow, because you can see the stakes. And this is what we offer in High Noon. This is why we give mentorship. This is why we have facilitators. This is why we have community, is because your problems stop feeling like the biggest thing ever when you start grappling with other people on your problems. You start to realize, I can overcome this. Yeah, for sure. Because you see other people overcoming in your groups. You also feel encouraged by other people's words. And a lot of times the magic is honestly just in talking about your problems with other people. Because as you say the words, you're like, oh, this isn't as bad as it sounded in my head. When I speak it out loud, it seems a lot smaller. Okay? And so the last and fifth theme is a sense of belonging and purpose. So when we're isolated, life feels very hollow, actually. Like nobody would notice us if we've disappeared. I know you've had that. I know for a fact that you've had that thought rattling around in your head. My life doesn't matter. Nobody would even care if I stopped showing up, right? This is something I felt recently. So I was out of the country for a couple of years. And then I came back. I live in the Denver community, and I've been going to church for the past couple of months since I've been back. And I haven't really found my real way of giving back to my community. So I feel it was like last weekend was our October kind of celebration. And I didn't really have anything to do. I was walking around and everybody was busy doing stuff. And I was like, I don't even need to be here right now. And what I did was I caught that thought and I talked to myself and then I prayed about it. So I connected with myself and then I connected with Heavenly Parent, God. And I started to realize that this is the result of give and take action. It's funny how so many things harken back to just basic divine principle. I'm not giving much to our community right now, so I don't feel like I'm needed. Funny how that works. What would work better? Find active ways to invest in people. And then all of a sudden you're contributing and you feel connected and you feel like you're needed, right? So all this got worked out in me because I experienced that in isolation. I was like, yeah, this is not a nice feeling. I don't like this. And then I connected with myself and I connected with God. Now, actually, it's funny that I'm bringing this up. I just messaged somebody right before this podcast, unrelated. It was like an impulse because I found a way that I can volunteer more in a meaningful way in my community. So I just sent a message right before. And I'm going to keep on doing this until I find my way to contribute, because that's how I find meaning and value. And that's the human experience. If we don't contribute, we don't feel needed, and then we just kind of drift and we float away, right? So belonging and purpose, when we're connected, we feel anchored, like we matter, like our presence makes a difference. So please, this is all the more reason why you should join a group in High Noon if you haven't already. And if you are, invest in the people in your group. Go out of your way to really listen to your group members. Reach out to them from time to time if it makes sense to say, hey, How are you doing? When you invest in other people, it starts to help you to feel that feeling of belonging to something. This is where our generation, this young generation who are on TikTok, they're choosing to belong. A lot of them, this is not everybody, but like there's a generational desire to want to belong to the popularity by likes and clicks and even money and social status. There's no actually, that doesn't do anything for your soul. It does everything for your ego, but nothing for your soul. And so when people even do belong to that in crowd, it's like this nonstop, kind of never ending energy of feeding this need to fit in and continually fit in for the sake of your ego. And it is belonging, but skewed towards ego, not skewed towards your spirit, your soul. True belonging is when we feel connected to ourselves, to Heavenly Parent God, to a community of people, or a group of people, and to a sense of mission, okay? So when we're isolated, look at these two sides of yourselves, okay? You have your connected self and your isolated self. I just brought up a few themes, but think about your life. When you are isolated, how do you act? How do you think? What are the assumptions that you come to about yourself, about the world? Versus when you're connected, how do you eat? How do you treat yourself? How do you go to bed? How do you wake up, right? When we're talking at High Noon about creating your channel guk self or your High Noon self, what we're talking about is your connected self, the person that you are when you're at your very best. And when you start to optimize your life for being connected and staying connected, things will start working out more in your favor. And it doesn't mean that you'll have perfect days, but it means that even when difficulty comes, you deal with it in community, your difficulties fade away very quickly. Much quicker than if you tried to deal with it by yourself. This includes the heavy stuff like death. That's why we have funerals, so we could collectively mourn somebody, because we're not meant to just deal with it by ourselves. But same with victory. That's why people still go to sports games. They're so expensive now. I was born and raised in Toronto, Canada, and my family's still there. They just had the World Series there, and I talked to my parents over the weekend. They're like, our entire city is abuzz because the Toronto Blue Jays are in the World Series. P.S. They lost. I just found out that they lost, which is hilarious. It's funny to me. But the whole city loved being a part of this narrative that we're together on a team. There's definitely room for that. There's a need for that, to be a part of a community. Again, with sports, somewhat trivial. There's like value to it for sure, but it doesn't feed your soul. If your sense of worthiness and belonging in this universe is connected to a sports team, you probably need to go a little bit deeper, right? It's important, but really not that important in the scheme of things. So I hope this is helpful. Again, we have two selves. Which one are you feeding, your connected self or your isolated self? Look at your life and look at the different areas in which you are feeling connected, in which you're feeling isolated, and start to optimize for connection, and everything will start to flow again in your life, and you will start living in the High Noon. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for this. I'll talk to you next time.
Hey there, it is Benji here. I want to ask for your attention for just a second. We are asking y'all who have been benefiting from the podcast for just one small favor. We don't ask for much. In fact, we actually try very hard not to ask much. But if you have benefited from this content in the podcast, then I want to encourage y'all to consider becoming a donor for High Noon. Yes, we are still a nonprofit and we rely on your donations to function. And if you would like to just donate $10 a month, if you are looking for a way to contribute your cash to something really meaningful, then I hope that High Noon can be that thing for you. So you can go to highnoon.org/donate. You can click in a link somewhere down below this episode and become a donor for just $10 a month, or $20 or $100 or $1,000, whatever it is, guys. It is truly helpful. All right. So go check that out if you have benefited from this podcast in any way over the years. Lots of love.